trying to remember how this thought came to me exactly, but I know that once I figured out how to make custom brushes, there was one thought that plagued me. What if I drew my dog using my dog? And when I remember I don't really like drawing animals, I decided to draw that cute anime girl version of my dog instead. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well. While working on a certain project I've mentioned here and there before, I found myself having to make a few custom brushes, and after I learned how to register materials and make custom brush tips in Clip Studio, I only had one thought. I want to make a brush out of my dog. And in fact, why stop at one? Why not make an entire drawing, but all of the tools have my dog as the brush tip? So I picked out a cute picture of her, and I got to work. And this isn't meant to be a tutorial on how to make a custom brush. There are a lot of people who know better ways to do it than me, but if you need a quick breakdown on the basics of it, I started by getting rid of the background in the picture, which is definitely the first thing you're gonna need to do if you wanted to make a brush tip out of something in a photograph. If you're feeling real bold, you can use the eraser for some good old destructive editing, but I used a clipping mask. And after that, I blocked out the silhouette, I changed the layer property so that the brush could change colors, and then I registered the material. After that, it's as simple as making a new tool and then adding the new Zola shape as the brush tip. Now, as a side note, I also made some brush tips for my 2 cats and my sister's hamsters, so if you all like this video, I can make at least 3 more. I also want to say that I just made these brushes for my own amusement, but if you like them, I will have them linked in the description for you to download. They're only available to Clip Studio Paint users because I gotta be honest, I don't really know how to make them for anything else, but they will be free to download. And speaking of the brushes, I tried to replicate my typical tools, but with Zola as the brush tip. I'll go over it more a little bit later, but replicating the tools was a lot harder than I thought it would be. But I made a hard brush, a soft brush, a blending brush, an airbrush, and a blur tool. I also made this one that I intended to use for sketching, but I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, but it will be included in the brush pack anyways. When I was done making the brushes, I also decided to make a special workspace for them because I have a very strong muscle memory for the keyboard shortcuts I use, so I thought that doing this would make my life a little bit easier. I just made a copy of my workspace, but with all of my usual tools replaced with Zola brushes. This way I don't have to hurt my brain too much when I'm using the tools. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to draw the human version of my dog. I made it in another video, which by the way, I'll kind of slip on that video, so you should check it out after this one. But before we get to the drawing, let's have a word from today's sponsor. Thank you to Just Sketch Me for sponsoring this video. They sponsored a previous video of mine, but in case you missed that one, Just Sketch Me is a pose reference tool for artists that helps to get the hassle of doing pose work out of the way when drawing. Not only do they have a number of preset body and hand poses for you to use as is or to adjust further, but moving the joints on all of the different models available is incredibly simple, letting you make a pose from scratch with ease. And if you like a pose you made or use a certain pose frequently, you can save it for future use with Just Sketch Me Pro. Speaking of which, while the free version of Just Sketch Me is a great free tool to use, there are a number of features that make Just Sketch Me Pro well worth the buy. Whether you're looking for even more models to pose, accessories for your models ranging from weapons to furniture to vehicles and more, or the ability to import your own models and images, Just Sketch Me Pro is jam-packed with features that every artist will find useful. I am really grateful the folks who made this program wanted to work with me again because it's genuinely something I use very often in my work ever since they reached out to me the first time, especially on my monthly Patreon prints. I don't have the ability to make larger art prints, and constantly posing characters in a 4x6 format is more challenging than you'd think, and as a result, I tend to go for more dynamic angles in order to make more interesting poses work. And seeing how notoriously difficult those poses typically are, Just Sketch Me is a big lifesaver for me. Just Sketch Me is available for free with no time limit, and the first 100 people to use my code Oliver's Antics to sign up to Just Sketch Me Pro will get 20% off. Thank you so much again to Just Sketch Me for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's get to the drawing. Before I get into talking about the actual drawing, hi there, future Oliver, how you doing? I just finished going through all of this footage and it ended up being a lot faster than I thought it would, so I thought, hey, I'll go ahead and edit out all of the canvas flips for you. You're welcome. And I also thought it would be fun to count the amount of canvas flips that I edited out. And this might not be an exact number because it's very possible that I missed a couple in this video or forgot to tap on my little counter thingy when I was counting them. But I edited out 1,155 canvas flips again, you're welcome. Took me a long time to do, so I'm going to need at least 1,155 of you to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, because, my god. Anyway, I just needed to complain about that. Here's past Oliver talking about the drawing. When I decided I wanted to make this video, I wanted to only use Zola-shaped brushes. That said, I didn't make a Zola eraser since I usually use the transparent brush tool. That said, I do think I accidentally used the regular eraser tool a couple of times. I hope you can forgive me. I also used the paint bucket tool and the lasso fill tool when I put in my flat colors. I use these tools a lot, but there isn't a way I can think of to make them Zola themed, so again, I hope you can forgive me. The soft brush I use to sketch with is probably my favorite out of the whole batch. I started using soft brushes to sketch with not long ago, and it's been working out great for me. The one I typically use is a very smooth one with no texture. I'm pretty sure the brush tip is just a circle. And while I like it, I think this texture adds a nice look to a sketch. And speaking of the texture, while it was overall nice to use, I did have to get used to it, both from an aesthetics point and a functionality point. After the sketching phase, the texture had a bit of a learning curve to it. It is textured all around, but because of her feet at the bottom, there was more texture at the bottom of the brush compared to the top. And I could have made it so that the brush tip changes shape with the direction of the line to make a more consistent shape, but I remember not liking the way it looked when I tried it out off camera. And that's something that didn't really come to mind while making the sketch, but it made itself very apparent when I started the line art. And I really like the way that the texture looks on the line art. And I added larger lines to the parts closest to us to emphasize the texture and give us a fun visual effect. But I started to struggle a bit when I started adding in the shading. I never used a textured toothy brush like this to add shading before, so I had to both get used to the look of it and figure out how to go about using it. Generally it wasn't too difficult, but I had to rotate the canvas a bit more than usual because her feet at the bottom of the brush kept throwing me off. And if you know me at all, I love rotating my canvas, so that's saying a lot. Then we get to the part of the drawing I struggled with the most, which was the blending. Firstly, the texture didn't show up nearly as much in the blending brush, and I have no idea why. Even now, after recording this, I just don't know. And when I would use the hard brush to put down the shading, it would be very textured. Then when I would switch over to the blending brush, the lines would look so much smoother. And despite all of that, the brush tip shape was still Zola, which very much affected the output on the brush settings. And now we get back to how copying the settings on my most used brushes is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Because in theory, finding brush settings I liked for this blender should be as simple as copying the settings from the regular blending brush I used. But apparently, the shape of the brush tip changes so much about how these settings work, and I couldn't even tell you why. The brushes that I usually make are things like shapes and lines to make repetitive details easier. Like for example, this fluffy-ish brush that I made, which is just like a bunch of little lines. So then that way, whenever I go to draw more fluffy things, it just makes that process a lot easier for me. But when using that brush, it's just a bunch of those little lines repeating in a ribbon pattern versus a brush like this, where the actual shape of the brush tip is a lot less defined, I guess. When I'm using it, you can't really tell that it's my dog. Because I don't really know a great way to say this, because again, I'm not an expert at making brushes, but the brush tip has like a lot less gaps in it. And so since it's not a repeating ribbon and there aren't a lot of gaps in between each little dot thingy that the brush makes, it kind of comes out as a really weird textured blob, and you can't really tell that it's a dog unless you make the brush really big and tap on the screen, or if you're really looking for it after you already know what the brush tip is. That's a big tangent for me to just say I don't know why it affects the settings the way that it does, but it most definitely does. Because after I copied the settings pretty much exactly from my previous blending brush and added the Zola-shaped tip, it functioned entirely different from my typical blending brush. I don't know if this is like common knowledge for people who regularly make custom brushes that aren't just supposed to be used as like a stamp or whatever. So if anybody out there knows why the brush tip affects it as much as it does, I would love to hear it, so maybe I can adjust the settings a little bit more. But either way, I was struggling. I made all of these brushes before filming, and I also adjusted all of the settings before filming. But when I got around to using the blending brush in this video, I ended up playing with the brush brush settings so much that I eventually just kept the tool settings window opened while I worked on this. And eventually I found some settings that I was relatively happy with, but in order to get a similar effect, I had to use the airbrush and blur tools a lot more than usual. And even then, I'm not sure if it's exactly how I would usually draw things. That might just be me being a little bit critical on myself, and also I stare at my art all day, every day. So you guys can all let me know how I did on that. But because of the fact I had to switch back and forth between tools more often than usual, I had to change up my technique a little bit, and I had to keep playing with the brush settings and the blending tool. I ended up taking a lot longer on this drawing than I usually would. I would say something like this would take me like 4 to 5-ish hours to make, but this one took me about 8. A part of it might be user error mixed with the fact that I wasn't used to using these brushes. I think the biggest thing I kept fighting with this brush about is that I kept trying to get the smooth blending that I usually go for, except I was using brushes that don't really allow me to do that. Obviously, the brush itself is super textured, much more than my typical blending brush that just has a circle for the shape. No paper texture added to it. So on top of the texture and not being able to have the typical blending settings that I liked, I just could not for the life of me get the typical smooth blending that I would with this brush alone. A good portion of my drawing process goes towards rendering my drawings anyway, but I would say more so in this drawing I spent much more time on the rendering than I did any other part of the drawing. And to finish off this drawing, I thought it would look nice to add a little bit of lens flare lighting effect thing, but I was determined to use only these brushes while making it, so I had to figure out how to do that on the fly because I was too lazy to look up references or tutorials. I have a lot of different brushes for lighting, a lot of what's it called, bokeh blur or whatever.
Bokeh.
I don't know, all of the things that make it look really shoujo, which honestly, this isn't even really how my dog is. She's kind of a gremlin. This is more of how she thinks she is, but either way, I didn't want to use those because I was very determined to use the Zola brushes exclusively, or at least mostly exclusively in this drawing. But I also, because I have brushes normally for this, I didn't really know how to do it. I kind of just played around with a bunch of settings until something looked good. And again, I was way too lazy to look up references or tutorials, so it turned out however it turned out. Also, as a side note, I knew deep down in my soul that the drawing would look better if I added a blur effect to the skirt, but my pride would not let me do it while I was filming this because I loved the way the ruffles turned out and I spent so long doing it and I was just really stubborn about it. I did not want to blur it because you would see a lot less of those details. But again, I knew deep down it would look better if I did, so I ended up doing that off camera when I thought I was done recording this video. But even though I did have a certain set of struggles while making this drawing, I had a lot of fun doing it. These definitely won't replace my usual brushes, but I would love to play with them more often, especially the soft brush. I had a wonderful time sketching with that brush, and also I change brush sizes a lot whenever I'm making a drawing, and whenever I would make my brush really big to try and blend something or add in some flat colors, I would just see the shape of my dog and it would bring me a lot of joy. So I definitely love that. But with that, our Zola bear is finished. And before we take a look at the finished drawing, let's take a quick Patreon break. I'd like to give a big thank you to all of my patrons for helping make this video possible, especially my tiers 3 and 4 members. Big shout out to Jules, Sammy Yang 127, The Tiny Artist, Jupiter Draws, Nyoko Arts, Sage Rosado, Isla, It's Dorky Arts, Anna, Nayhaven, Kiera, Hikaru, Jamie, Creatively Anxious, Dazzy Bones, Michael Sasha Rose, Red Boots the Time Traveler, Kaya Knight, Lauka2, Ava Krupp, Clementine Jam, Lovely Styron, Jay Johnson, Vivi Martin, Bread, Fantastic Artist, Newly D, Joss, J Maximus, Pumpkin Prince Lala, Sushi McNushi, Bug, Planting Houses, Hen, Ravern, Gravity Drop, Blue, Daydream, Blue Devil 4, OMG It's Muppet, Sharu Amy, Sunset Lemonade, Danny, Corbett Dom, Kyron, Leia, Tita K, Donna Fangirl, Oswin, Luna Yoku, Sammy the Boy Draws, Athena Belladonna, Kay Manning, Anime Fan 110, Luxtorium, Uinamon, Non-Toxic, Exficat, Estelian Studio, Bixel, Cooper, Nathaniel Langerman, Deanna Riano, AJ, Rachel, Anik, Vampiric Soup, Linny, Yuto, Tired TM, Six Sad World, Sam Hickey, Nico, and Glorianne Celestin. Thank you all so much for the extra support. It really means a lot to me. And if you are interested in becoming a part of my Patreon, check out the link in the description box below. Ooh boy, making this was a process. When I say I had a lot of fun making this, I really mean it. So let me know if you guys liked it and if you want me to do the same thing but with the other pet brushes that I made. Neither of them have human versions, so I don't know what I would draw for those videos, but I could figure something out, so let me know if you guys are interested in that. Also, don't forget to check out Just Sketch Me in the description box below and get that discount for the first 100 people who sign up, and also check out the Zola brushes if you are a Clip Studio user and you liked anything that you saw in this video. I don't really have anything else to say. I feel like this video was a bit shorter than usual, but either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.